The Vessel. Episode 29. Occursum. As the last of the tremors from the second explosion died down, Zane checked the screen on his wrist. "Right on time," he said proudly. Zane and Drew Colton, the largest child of Eden, but certainly not the brightest, had just managed to escape mining before it locked down. Now they were rounding up all the fellow children they could find, which, after some 30 minutes, had amounted to exactly 6 men and 3 women. They found a secure room to gather themselves in, deciding they needed to rest for a few minutes and gather their strength. Ever since the founder himself had been blessed with the vision that drove him to form the Children of Eden, they had been working toward this day, praying for it. It was the day they made their intentions clear to God, their way of saying to him they no longer wished to follow this false path. They were asking him to pluck them from the eternal emptiness and cast them into the purifying light of Eden. A unified goal, that was the gift given to them by the founder, though others knew him by a different name, J.B. Douglas, former captain of Ark 1. Captain Douglas had been working toward the reclamation when he fell ill, forcing him to retire not only from his post as captain, but that of Keeper of the Word. His first officer had been a promising young woman named Jennifer Ashby, who, try as he might, never showed any interest in allowing the Word of God into her heart. The great disappointment of J.B. Douglas's life had been dying before Ashby could be turned into a believer, leaving his beloved Ark to the heretics. His final instructions to Zane, his second in command not on the ship but with the Children of Eden, his last words as he lay dying on that medbed, were to continue trying to win over the captain. "And if that doesn't work," he said, "take the damn ship from her." Douglas had even recorded a video documenting his wishes for the future of Ark 1. Zane had been planning to play it for the passengers once he had them rounded up and calmed down. That was until everything fell apart, before the abnormal ones surfaced. Then, everything changed. The other children didn't understand how Howard Blackwood was leading the abnormal ones from his cryopod. To them, it spoke to the true evil of the man that he was capable of such things, that he could command an army of demons even while frozen in cryosleep. Zane knew the truth about Blackwood. He knew how the man came and went, how he operated in the shadows, but he let the others have their superstitions about the man. It served his purposes just fine. The new struggle the Children of Eden faced was twofold. Not only did they have to overcome the resistance of the Ark's passengers, now they had to survive the onslaught of hungry creatures currently spreading through the ship. Luckily, before Captain Douglas had died, he'd told Zane all about the bridge's little secret, how there was an armory hidden in its walls, an armory Zane very much planned to seize. "The reclamation," one of the children finally spoke, an incredible sadness weighing down his voice. "It's ruined." "This wasn't how it was written," another said. One of the women in the group turned to Zane. "What now, Zane? What do we do?" Zane looked at the small group, all of them staring at him, waiting for his next command. "To be completely honest with you," he said, "I'm deeply troubled." They murmured. "I'm troubled because I know exactly what we have to do, but I'm not sure you all have the resolve to see it through." The group began to plead with him, begging him to trust them. Zane tried not to smile. It felt good to be needed. To be needed was to be loved. He looked each of them in the eye, then said, quite simply, "We need to save the ship." They were silent, caught off guard. "What do you mean, save it?" the woman asked. Zane stood. This was the day he'd been born for. "Our holy day has been interrupted," he said. "That's true, but it's not over yet. We can still lead the passengers of this ship back to the true path. Don't you see they need us? Their souls need saving, now more than ever." He looked around the room with purpose. "God has shown us the way, fellow children. If we save the Ark from the abnormal ones, if we stop Blackwood's evil plan, the passengers of this ship will see us for the saviors we are." They all talked at once, newly excited. Then the woman said, "What about the ones who don't see us that way? We just set off 2 mining charges on the ship. Some of them won't forget that." "There's a simple solution for that," Zane answered with a smile. "They'll be the first sacrifices." The others nodded and approved, though the woman didn't seem convinced. Already, a plan was forming in Zane's mind. There was one more charge on the ship, the bomb that would take out the Ark's brain, permanently deleting Sun from existence. At the time, it had been necessary to ensure the Ark would never again resume its fruitless journey. But now they needed to reach the charge before it went off, not just to buy themselves time, but to put it to better use. The Ark needs to die, yes, but not like this, not crawling with abnormal ones. It was meant to rot on the wind, not choke to death, riddled with cancer. Come, join me, children. Let us be its saviors. Rejuvenated, they prepared for the journey. Officer Hope's mission had been to secure the bridge and access the armory, but Hope's had failed to check in before the second mining charge took out the comms system. Zane ordered 3 children to travel up to the bridge and ensure both the bridge and the armory's capture. Then he, Drew Colton, and the rest of the group headed toward Deck 3 to see about the bomb. As they traveled, slowly and with knives ready, Zane eyed the woman who had questioned him. She was whispering something to one of the other children, who had an unsure look on his face. Zane knew a pot stirrer when he saw one. He'd been one himself once, but there was only room for one. Something would have to be done about her. Cornelia and Amani tried not to talk about the things they'd seen, the monsters crawling toward them, the fellow passengers torn to bloody shreds. If they were going to survive the day, if they were going to keep their sanity about them, they silently agreed it would be by serving a purpose, by focusing all their energy on one thought, on one mission. That mission would be to secure the farm, protect the animals, they decided, to protect the future. The 2 women had been slowly making their way down the Ark, ducking from room to room and stairway to stairway for what felt like hours, when they finally reached Deck 11. They still had a ways to go, however, with the farm located on the opposite end of the deck. They decided to take a shortcut through food processing, despite that section's apparent lack of working emergency lights. It was a decision they quickly regretted. Even with the bio-flashlight they'd found in a cleaning closet, the food processing area was too cluttered to be safe. The beam of light couldn't reach clearly to the other side, where they needed to go. The wide room was fitted with dozens of specialized machines that, on any given day, were responsible for the mincing, macerating, liquefaction, emulsification, cooking, pickling, pasteurizing, and preserving of every ingredient harvested from the farms, water environments, and even the gen labs on board. Now, it was little more than a sea of shadows and brushed metal hiding spots for monsters, both real and imagined. As the women slowly weaved through the processing machines, Imani in front holding the bio-flashlight, they noticed the ceiling ahead had collapsed in places, wires and light fixtures hanging loose. "That second blast must have been right above here," Cornelia noted. "There's nothing above us but environments." Imani swept the light across the badly damaged deck, looking for the exit. "Then what could have done this?" "I don't know. I don't want to know. The only thing that matters right now is getting back to the farm." "Yeah, before we buy it," Cornelia joked under her breath. Imani ignored it. The flashlight flickered in her hand, the bioluminescence dying out. She slapped it against her palm, trying to keep it working. "This is why no one uses these anymore," she sighed. "Give it to me. I know the trick," Cornelia said. Imani turned to hand over the light, but as she did, the beam of fading light shone onto Cornelia's shoulder for just a moment. There was something on her, a shape. Imani jerked the light back to see. A cockroach the size of her fist rested on Cornelia's shoulder, though it was no kind she'd seen before. Its shell looked more like scabbed-over skin. It winced at the light, the hairs raising up on its fleshy back. Just before the light cut out, plunging them into darkness, the cockroach spread its wings, hissing at her with a mouthful of human teeth. Gunnar, DeSanto, and Dr. Hannigan had made good progress from Deck 8 to the living quarters on 5 with the help of their new friends. Dornier units Newton and Schrödinger, formerly fitted with modular oxygen and propellant attachments, flew ahead of them on silent mode, checking that the path was clear. The views from their eyes fed directly to Gunnar's wrist, and he watched them carefully for any signs of danger. The hallway was eerily quiet, free of passengers and creatures alike, though they passed evidence that people had been there very recently. Their blood told incomplete stories, stories occasionally completed by corpses. DeSanto watched Gunnar carefully for reactions to his wrist feed. Only once did Gunnar stop and signal for them to turn around, silently, to not draw the attention of whatever he'd spotted up ahead. When they were far enough away, DeSanto asked him what he'd seen. "I'd rather not talk about it," Gunnar replied heavily. A lack of humor from him wasn't just rare, it was downright unsettling. Somewhere in the middle of Deck 6, the whispering started up again. DeSanto knew by now the voices were coming from inside, and yet the effect of hearing his name drift from the lips of a half-eaten corpse was no less disturbing. As usual, he continued on, pretending not to hear anything, both for the sake of the others as well as his own sanity. As if refusing to be ignored, the whispers became screams. The screams became white-hot light that shot through his eyes and lit up his brain like overloaded circuitry. His vision shattered into a kaleidoscope of images, crystalline horrors that assaulted his senses. Human eyes on snail antennae. Black, loosely hinged jaws slipping through dark water. Blood moving through an opaque proboscis. Black tendrils tearing open flesh. The crack of a sternum and the wet puncture of a rib through lungs. And through it all, weaved into the visions like capillary veins, a terrible voice boomed. 1,000 ancient sounds condensed into one solitary nightmare. "Hyenae infitu diplopoda," the voice said. "Don't be frightened of him, my dear." In a blink, DeSanto was back in the dark hallway. He glanced over at Dr. Hannigan, who looked back at him with her usual expression of concern. "Are you all right?" the doctor asked quietly. "Absolutely not," he replied. Cornelia had felt something on her neck, but she dismissed it as nothing more than paranoia, a case of the creeps brought on by that dark place. After what they'd seen, she wasn't too hard on herself for letting her imagination run wild. That was before Imani had shone the light on her, revealing the hissing ball of nightmares an inch from her face. A flash of teeth snapped at her, but with a scream and a wild slap, she managed to knock the thing away, horrified by the weight of it on her hand. The two of them ran in the dark, tripping and fumbling through the food processing plant as they desperately sought the way out. Imani must have dropped the bio-flashlight in the midst of panic. A beam of light spun behind them, the drop knocking the last bit of juice out of it. Cornelia glanced back at the spinning light and saw, by the gaze of its rotation, a swarm of mouth roaches pouring out of the half-crumbled ceiling. It looked like a wound gushing infected blood. The blackened room was a maze of metal and hissing and buzzing and high-pitched grunts and cries. Cornelia and Imani navigated their own private death trap, those chomping teeth following them all the way. The only comforting thought was that the insects couldn't see them either. Or at least Cornelia hoped. She quickly became turned around and found herself separated from Imani. The thought of it sent a wave of panic through her body. Imani's voice called out to her in the dark, but she was too disoriented to determine its direction or how to reach it. Cornelia slammed into a wall at full force. She saw lights, though not the helpful kind. Pain radiated through her bones, and she shook it off. Feeling along the cold wall, sensing the air of nearby wings on her neck, her fingers found a control screen that blinked on at her touch. She pounded on the screen frantically, hoping one of the buttons would turn on the lights. Their only chance of staying alive would be to find the way out, yet neither of them knew the place well enough to navigate it blindly. A mincing machine came to life less than 20 feet away. Then a second. This one was across the room. The red lights on the machine were barely enough to see by, but they were something. Even better, the noise of their gears and motors seemed to be attracting the attention of the mouth roaches. Most of the swarm had shifted focus, the chattering cloud descending on the machines. Something large came at Cornelia from the darkness. She froze, expecting death to follow. Instead, it was that beautiful face she'd never grown tired of seeing every day on the farm. "Come on," Imani whispered. "I think I found the way out." She turned to lead the way, stepping back into the shadows. Cornelia breathed relief, ready to follow her friend into hell itself. She glanced to her left, and she was thankful she had. A damp mop leaned against the wall, next to a broken floor-cleaning drone. She left the drone, but grabbed the mop, holding it with both hands in front of her, a fighting staff that stunk of black mold and stale disinfectant. Imani and Cornelia crept between the machines, doing everything they could to stay silent. The swarm of mouth roaches had nearly covered the two mincers, their fat bodies obscuring what little light there was. The sound of the insects grew angry as they realized the machines had no food for them. If Cornelia and Imani were lucky, and at the pace they were going, they would be long gone by the time the mouth roaches returned to their previous hunt. But the machines had other plans. The entire assembly line of food processing equipment fired up now, a room full of equipment chugging to life. Whether it was a mouth roach that set them off or a program Cornelia had started wasn't clear, yet it didn't matter. The effect was the same. The room became a cacophony of lights and sounds, one that didn't go unnoticed for long. A set of swinging doors leading to the next processing area slammed open, causing the mouth roaches to shriek and scatter into the air. A terrible silhouette appeared in the open doorway. It was a wide-faced, hairless man with bulging eyes on top of his head. Cornelia had never seen such a vile and slime-slick thing in her life, and her mind reeled at the sight of it. The misshapen creature hunched down on thick, muscular hind legs, blinking with two sets of translucent eyelids. Its eyes appeared to be following the wing motion of the startled mouth roaches. In a half-hop, half-run, the creature chased after the scattering roaches, using its darting, bubblegum tongue to eat as many as it could. Cornelia's skin crawled at the crunch of teeth and flesh as the amphibious creature devoured one fat roach after the other, its bulbous eyes depressing into its skull to help force its food down. Something touched Cornelia's arm. She nearly cried out before realizing it was Imani reaching to pull her along. The two snuck past the sickening sight of one monster devouring countless more, neither woman daring to make a sound, even as they stared unbelieving at the amphibious man's translucent skin. Soft intestine and bone could be seen through its slick, semi-clear flesh, sickening peeks at what made it tick. So distracted by its anatomy, they hadn't noticed the second creature entering the room. By the time she turned to see the second frog thing coming toward them, the creature was close enough that Cornelia could see the inner workings beneath its translucent skin. This one was clearly female. Even her breasts were translucent, the fatty tissue visible beneath their oily surface. Cornelia lashed out with the mop. The business end connected with the amphibian woman's face, driving her back on her webbed feet. Cornelia felt a swell of pride as she saw her attack had drawn blood, but the sense of victory didn't last long. Even over the screaming and crunching of mouth roaches, the dull snap of breaking bone echoed in Cornelia's ears. It wasn't any of Cornelia's bones snapping, nor was it Imani's. The frog woman, if it could be called that, twitched and stretched her oily arms until the violent muscular contractions forced naked bone through her fingertips, exposing bloody, jagged claws ready to be used. Cornelia was stunned. "Hit it again!" Imani cried out, but the creature was already on the attack. It leapt forward, bringing Cornelia to the ground under all its slimy, corpulent weight. The mop knocked free from her hands. Cornelia was defenseless as the pungent creature assailed her with its blood-slick claws. The first cuts it inflicted tore cloth. The next tore skin. Cornelia struggled to cover her face. A cry came from the frog woman's rubbery lips, and Cornelia uncovered her face to see. Imani had recovered the mop and driven its stick end into the frog woman's bulbous eye. The creature trembled on thick legs, blinking with all its eyelids at the snapped-off bit of wood sticking out from its bleeding eye. Imani helped Cornelia to her feet as a great, roaring, croak scream tore through the room. The female creature's squeals of pain had drawn the attention of the male, who no longer cared about its feast of mouth roaches. Again came the sick crack of bones, this time louder, thicker. The male bared its wet finger claws, easily double the length of the female's. Imani and Cornelia ran. They ran for their lives as the hopping, running, croaking force tore after them, knocking down everything in its way. Imani led the way, mop in hand, toward the door at the far end, just past the worst section of ceiling yet, its wires hanging so low they looked like nerves ripped from their body, the pipes like bone pushed through skin. They ducked under the collapsing ceiling, the vibrations of their footsteps threatening to bring the whole mess down on their heads, and reached the door. More darkness waited in the hallway beyond. But the door wouldn't close, wouldn't budge. The raging creature, with thick eyes, razor-like bone claws, and see-through skin, was nearly on them, coming to pay back what they'd done to his mate tenfold. To Cornelia's surprise, Imani turned to head back. "What are you doing?" Cornelia screamed. Imani didn't bother to answer. She swung and smashed and beat on the half-dead ceiling, trying to bring it down. If it worked, their way back would be cut off, but so would any chance of the creature reaching them. "Stay back!" Imani shouted, the ceiling starting to give, but not quickly enough. The creature was already shoving its way under, waddle twitching and swiping at them with new claws. As always, Cornelia knew exactly what had to be done to solve the problem, but for the first time in her life, she actually did it. Cornelia pulled Imani out of the way, surprising her so much she nearly tossed the woman to the floor. She glanced back at her friend, then to the slimy creature now only a foot away. Then she reached up, grabbed onto the largest length of water pipe she could find, and pulled. After a grueling journey in which Gunnar only had to use his combi tool once to fend off a cat-like creature with black tendrils peering at them from an air vent, he, DeSanto, and Dr. Hannigan finally reached Captain Ashby's quarters. The Dorniers were already in standby mode when the three travelers arrived, 2 floating guard dogs awaiting orders. The closer they'd gotten to their destination, the stronger the visions had torn at DeSanto's mind. They were screaming now. He took a minute to kneel, breathe, and close his eyes. The more he focused, the clearer the pictures became. The visions were of pain and death, the victims his friends. Gunnar's blood became a rain shower. Dr. Hannigan's crushed and decapitated head gave way to the real Hannigan checking his eyes for signs of brain trauma. She held her finger up and asked him to follow it. "What's wrong with him?" Gunnar asked. "Can't be sure. Looks like he suffered a break from reality." Gunnar grunted. "Reality is suffering a break from reality." He checked a side hallway, making sure it was clear. Dr. Hannigan continued to check DeSanto for signs he was okay. "I need to go in there alone," DeSanto told her. Hannigan frowned. Gunnar returned to his friend's side. "And why would you need to do that?" "It's just something I have to do." He looked from Gunnar to Hannigan and back to Gunnar. To say the words aloud wouldn't just sound crazy, it was inviting them to come true. "I can't explain it," he concluded. "I guess that's not any weirder than anything else today." "He shouldn't go by himself," Hannigan said. Then to DeSanto, "You can't. You're not well." "You don't look so hot yourself," DeSanto said. "This isn't a joke, Erik. Forget the monsters. You can have an aneurysm or a stroke with no one to help you. You could fall and split your head open." DeSanto nodded. "I know, but I need you to trust me on this." Hannigan wrestled with the thought, looking to Gunnar for backup. The big oaf just shrugged at her and said, "Fuck it, right? I need some answers. I don't know about you." "All right," Hannigan sighed, pointing in DeSanto's face. "But only because I owe you one. After this, you have to follow strict doctor's orders." "Yes, ma'am," DeSanto said, attempting a smile. He stood up tall, feeling dizzy, nauseous, tired, confused, and drained, but otherwise great. "Take this," Gunnar said. He held out a small comms device he'd ripped out of his helmet. "Microphone's not functional, but the tracker still works." "I'll be 20 feet away," DeSanto protested. "Yeah, sure, and everything else has gone exactly to plan." DeSanto took the device and slipped it into his uniform's breast pocket. "Don't let anyone in," he said. "And I mean anyone." He looked at Dr. Hannigan. "Yes, ma'am," Gunnar said. He turned to stand guard, a third watchdog, only briefly glancing over his shoulder as DeSanto opened the door. DeSanto stood at the open doorway, taking another second to focus his thoughts. He was on the verge of something big, and he knew it. Every step he'd taken had led him here. Every voice and vision, every question and dream. Where the path went, he didn't know, but at least it was forward. As he entered the quarters, strange lights filled his vision. With each step he took, the strange lights grew in intensity until he rounded the corner and found their source. A man stood on the other side of the reinforced quarantine glass. He appeared calm and in full control. The man faced DeSanto, patiently waiting for him to come forward. Even from across the room, even in the half-dark of bioluminescence, DeSanto could see the man's skin was a patchwork of color and texture. Shadows moved around him, living tendrils of alternating darkness and light. "Hello, Erik," the man said. His voice was the voice from DeSanto's nightmares. "My name is Dr. Howard Blackwood." He smiled. "I've been looking forward to this moment."